Well, good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update. It's our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, all live in real time. This conversation, like all of our Lunch Update programs, are made possible by our sponsors, Perkins Coie, Baker Tilly, and Easy Office Products. Today's program will feature a conversation with Michelle Behnke, president of the American Bar Association and a member of the Boardman Clark Law Firm right here in Madison. But first, let me give you a few chamber updates. This coming Monday, we'll host our first Chamber 101 of the year. This event is currently full, but you can join the waitlist at the link that you will see in the chat or on our website at madisonbiz.com. If you're not able to make it to Chamber 101, we sure hope that you will take a look at the schedule and prioritize making it to the next one. You can already mark your calendars for some of our biggest events of the year. So on April 9th, we will host our annual lunch icebreaker. That's a Thursday, April 9th. You can join the wait list already to be the first to know when the registration opens. You'll also see that in the chat. You can also guarantee a seat because it will sell out. It always does by becoming a sponsor. And you can contact Jill Wood on our team to learn more. And Jill's email address is also in the chat. On Thursday, August 18th, Greater Madison's premier live pitch event, the pressure chamber, is back and is at the Sylvie once again. So for those of you who have seen it for a number of years, we have moved from the Majestic to the Sylvie last year. It was a great space and well activated and a huge crowd. And if you want to see what's next when it comes to Madison's innovation and startup, I encourage you to put that on your calendar. Again, Thursday, August 18th. Link is in the chat. On Thursday, October 8th, you see a Thursday theme here. So October 8th, 2026 will be the 73rd annual dinner where we will bring together nearly 1,300 business and community leaders at Monona Terrace. And you can also join the wait list for that as well. So get a jump on the moment, get ready to get planned. And if you want more information about it, on any of those wait lists, any of those events, there will be a link in the chat. But you can also just go to our website. And if you are interested in sponsorship of any of those events, in addition to the icebreaker, at the top of the higher part of the chat, top of the chat with Jill's contact information, she'd be happy to assist you. And now for our guest. Michelle Behnke is the president of the American Bar Association and a member of the Boardman Clark Law Firm right here in Madison. In fact, I think right now, Michelle and I are sitting one floor away from each other, both with Capitol views to your right and my left. She was previously a principal of her own firm where she practiced law focused on business and real estate and estate planning. She was also previously a member of the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Unfortunately, I didn't get to work with Michelle in my role, but certainly know that she was and is well regarded by her colleagues on the board. Michelle received her bachelor's degree in economics from UW-Madison and her law degree from the University of Wisconsin Law School, so a double badger. She has served as the American Bar Association's treasurer. She chaired the ABA's Commission on Racial and Ethnic Diversity in the profession and was president of the State Bar of Wisconsin from 2004 to 2005. So with that, Michelle, welcome to Lunch Update.
Thank you so much, Zach. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Thanks for doing this. I know you've got national responsibility, so appreciate the opportunity to have you on and have you on a day when you are in Madison.
Sure.
So as much as we included in the bio, there was just as much as that we couldn't include. We'd have been here. The whole show would have been me reading the bio. But I guess if I were just to sort of bookend it, you grew up here, went to school here, but why did you choose to build your career here? So just, tell us how you stayed in Madison.
Sure. Well, like lots of people, you learn Madison and you realize it really is an incredible place to live and work and play. But part of my decision was really wanting to be or be a part of the future that I wanted to see. My dad was actually stationed at Truex. That's how we got to Madison in the first instance. He was in the Air Force. I was 3 when we arrived, so I didn't have any decision in coming here. But when we came, Madison was not an especially diverse place. And as I grew and as I learned things that were going on in the community, as I was at the university, being in a diverse space was really important. And you can do one of two things. You can say, I'm going to go find it, or kind of field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. And so staying in Madison and being a part of the community and being part of that resource as new people come, so that they could see what Madison has to offer, that was really important to me.
Yeah, I love that, and I certainly love that you chose to do that. And now here you sit at the top of the legal profession and highlighting Madison. Everybody who has to hear your bio gets to hear Madison, Wisconsin. And
it's
I guess
it's
you didn't
fabulous.
have
Yeah.
what's that?
It's fabulous.
Yeah,
Saying Madison, Wisconsin is fabulous. Yeah.
yeah. I guess you didn't have a say. Your dad probably didn't have a say either where he was stationed.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how did you get involved? What inspired you to get involved in the bar association? I mean, you obviously have a ton of legal work, lots of clients. What made you step back from, what was front facing and say, I want to get involved at a higher level, at a broader level?
Really two things. Um, as a brand new lawyer, um, I mean, you go through law school and they give you the JD, right? And then you're supposed to be ready to go out there and do things. In actuality, it takes a lot. There's mentoring, there's learning the actual work with clients, all of those kinds of things. And I was just very fortunate to have people in my life, in my profession, that were willing to do that. And most often, they were connected to the bar. And so, since it happened for me, I wanted to make sure that I was there doing that for the next people coming into the profession. So part of it was a sense of gratitude and a sense of obligation. Um, but the other part is just the way I was raised right here in, Madison. That sense that things get better when people contribute, when they give back, when they share their perspectives. The old adage, to whom much is given, much is expected. So having attained that law degree, I felt like it was incumbent on me to give back and to be engaged in my profession.
And so let's talk specifically about the American Bar Association, so the
Sure.
national level. So describe the work I mean, I think for a lot of people, if you're not lawyers, you hear the bar and you think of a test, right?
Yeah.
Or the bar exam, right? And then, but bar association probably doesn't mean much to the average business leader or average community member. So maybe just take a step back for all of us and describe what does the ABA even do?
So we do a lot. Sometimes we talk about how much we do. It's really a big tent. Um, Part of our work is substantive law, helping lawyers be better lawyers. So we have something in the neighborhood of 36 substantive law sections. So if your practice is business or real estate, these are folks that are staying on the cutting edge. They're writing articles, they're putting on continuing legal education, they're helping lawyers stay current in the law. Law is one of those things. You graduate from law school and then immediately changes. So a good part of our work is substantive law, staying on top of it, advocating in that space. We'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk about AI and things that. So as new technologies come out, as new issues come out, advocating substantively. A part of our work is that advocacy, going out and talking about important issues. We talk a lot these days about legal deserts. And so we go and help lawmakers understand the issues and what proposed legislation could do or what it might not do. Um, as an example, in Wisconsin, most of our legislators are actually not lawyers. They're charged with drafting those laws. So we try to be helpful and be an additional resource for them. And then some of our work is really what I'd call changing the profession. So the Commission on Racial and Ethnic Diversity that you mentioned, I'm a former chair. We try to look at our own profession and things more broadly in society and find ways to make a difference, to engage in that work. So we're being regular lawyers as well as citizens and engaged in our larger community.
And so I'm assuming an organization like that has a professional staff, right? And
We
then
do.
so describe what the role of the president in that scenario is.
Sure. So the ABA has an executive director, and we have a staff in Chicago and DC, which is a little more than 700 people. So the day-to-day kinds of making the trains run on time, that's not my responsibility. But the president is really kind of the face and voice. One of our premier goals is to be the home in the legal profession, the home for all lawyers. And so in any given day, I might go speak to law students, help them understand what the profession that they're entering and what bar associations do to help support them as they enter the profession. I might be speaking to legislators. I might be talking with law deans. I might be attending a 150th anniversary celebration for the New York State Bar Association, sitting next to the governor. You really are kind of the face and voice of the association. You're listening and you're speaking on behalf of the association.
So what's it really like then? So that's how they sell you to get you to take the role. But now you're in it. What's it really like?
Oh, this morning, just this morning, I was reviewing the agenda for our upcoming board meeting. We'll be meeting in San Antonio in a couple of weeks. And then my next item was a prep call because I will have an opportunity to speak with Amal Clooney about some work that we've done together. So it's soup to nuts.
Yeah. So my assumption is whenever a busy person like you takes on additional work, you do it with some sense of priority. There's something you want to get accomplished. Like there's some burning platform that you say, if I did that, here's what I would do. So what were those priorities when you said yes to the role? What were you thinking? Here's what I want to get done.
So when I said yes, um, I was really focused, I will say, a little bit more on supporting lawyers. When I campaigned and I talked to people, I said I wanted to focus on supporting lawyers in their practice and connecting them with their passions. Those are the two things that bar associations have provided to me, helped me to be a better lawyer, but also helped me to do that work outside of client work that also drove my passions. I thought I know this will come as a shock to everybody. Lawyers take a little bit of time to embrace change. We rely on precedent. We like to think and analyze, and sometimes we don't embrace the change. I wanted to kind of talk about the changes that we might see on the horizon, and as part of making them good lawyers, making sure that we were thinking about those issues that were going to be coming down the pike. That's what I had hoped to do. You don't always do what you'd hope to do.
So how has that shifted? And now that you're in the role,
Yeah. So um, we have seen issues come up. One of the issues that we've spent an awful lot of time talking about is the rule of law and helping people understand uh, how our judicial system, how our governmental system works. We've seen some attacks on judges. Actual physical safety of judges has become an issue, and we've been speaking out on that. Calls for impeachment because of the decisions that judges have made. We've been speaking out on that. Um, Trying to help people understand the the kind of bigger picture globally. We are a much more global society, and so things that we do in the US affect other countries, things that other countries do affect us. We've tried to stay in kind of four pillars: the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the safety of the judiciary, and the independence of the legal profession. That's what I've been spending most of my time on.
well, I think we should dig into a few of those things.
Sure.
I guess let me ask you one more question before we sort of dig into. I'll
Yeah.
start out with next. We'll get into sort of rule of law work.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as um, the the time in the role of president isn't long, right? They don't. The tenure
That's it.
is quick. Um, but there's an opportunity to leave a fingerprint or a thumbprint or maybe a couple handprints, depending
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
When you think back of when this term is done and you're thinking about an organization that's will approach 150 years or is approaching in a couple of years will be 150 years old. What do you hope you're remembered for in the work that you did?
You know, I didn't start out thinking of that. You know, you want to do something, you want to be helpful, you want to be useful. But in the time that we're in, we will in fact celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And I've spent a lot of time reading and thinking about that. And um, it's pretty incredible to think of the role that lawyers had in bringing forth this country. I mean, they started out discussing and debating whether they were going to try to enforce their rules or their rights, I should say, as British citizens, or whether they would actually um, declare independence. That's an incredible thing for lawyers to be doing, to have a hand in. And so when I look back, I think because we are seeing some threats to the independence of the judiciary, some threats to the independence of the profession, um, I think if I look back and I did some things that help people really be energized about the importance of that, and they could find everyday ways that they could reassert that independence and help people understand the importance of that, I would be overjoyed. I would really feel like the time that I'm spending was worthwhile.
So you mentioned, the formative document of the country and the Declaration of Independence. You talked about the ABA's focus on the rule of law. It's often said that we are a nation of laws. We talk, you hear our politicians say that a lot on
Yes.
both sides, and
Yep.
um, and the other side will accuse the other side of not believing that. But it's said that we are a nation of law. So when you think about the rule of law in a place that is formed on the idea of being a nation of laws. What does that mean to you as the president of the legal community?
It's kind of internally, it means a lot. What I'm also finding is that lawyers use the term rule of law. It's kind of a shorthand for us. We understand kind of the components. But if I were in the grocery store, my neighbor that I'm, talking to may not know exactly what we mean by that. And so um, we've really been trying to work and find ways to make that much more understandable. So when we say rule of law or a nation of laws, we're talking about things like the law is publicly known. I used this really silly example once when I was speaking to some middle school students. I said, could you imagine if you woke up and you got in your car with your parents and you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you realize that half the people were driving on the other side of the road as if they were in London, right? And nobody sent you a message, nobody told you that this rule had changed. It would be utter chaos, right? You wouldn't, people would get hurt. You wouldn't know who was responsible because some people got a message that said this rule had changed. So when we talk about the law being publicly known and the public having an ability to impact and participate in the lawmaking, that the law is equally applied. Doesn't matter if it's Michelle Behnke in Madison, Wisconsin, or the governor of New York. And it's enforced independently. That it's not just one person who says, Michelle's wearing that blue suit that just irritates the living daylights out of me, and therefore I charge her with X, right? And it is, in fact, applied to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a person from Madison or a person from, the greatest, business in the world. Those are the components of rule of law that we want people to understand. And when you don't have those pieces, that's when chaos really can break out. And it's a very silly example that I gave, but you could have catastrophic consequences if that chaos does break out.
So using your definition of it, which I love, I don't think it's silly or simplistic. I think it's a perfect illustration of how chaos happens.
Right.
Um, do you think that the view of it, as you stated it, is universally believed today in this country?
It's interesting. I think from a word perspective, nobody wakes up and says, I don't believe in the rule of law.
Anarchists, maybe,
Right.
but
Maybe. I'm apparently not moving in their circles, so I don't get to hear it. But I do think that it is difficult sometimes because you will hear people from varying viewpoints who will say some of these same statements, but it doesn't play out in exactly the same way. Applying it evenly, having open government that you get to participate in, how you accomplish that sometimes looks differently to different people. And so I think that um, discussion amongst the public is really that much more important, so that we're not just using buzzwords, we're really sinking our teeth into what does it look like. And then you'll really know whether that's the experience you're having, and if that's what you want, what can you do to bring that about?
There's let me just say blanketly as a non-lawyer, it's a challenging time to practice law. It seems to me as a layperson that
Yeah,
seems like
yeah.
a challenging time. Um, as somebody who's in the thick of it, both your profession and this role, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing both the association and just the entire profession today?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to one of the challenges earlier. The pace of change is just so rapid. And as a profession, um, people depend on us to think carefully, to analyze things. We hear the word precedent a lot. We look backwards and we say, this new issue that we're facing, how is it similar to something in the past? How is it different? Why do we think that the outcome should be this way or that way? I mean, that's the normal role that lawyers would play. But when things are happening at this really rapid pace, it's hard to do that in the same way. I think about when I first started practicing, and this, I'm now that person. I was like, when I started practicing, right? The firm got a fax machine, and we were all standing around watching the curly paper come off, and the idea that you would respond to that fax in the same day, right? As opposed to writing a letter, mailing it, getting the letter, drafting the response, thinking about it. It'd be 2 weeks. The pace of change is just so dramatic. And the things that we're seeing are so different than things that we've seen in the past. So it's hard to say this is like this, and therefore the outcome should be more like this.
Mhm.
So those are all challenges to do that thing that everybody depends on us to do: analyze, help people figure out where the risks are, avoid the risks, and go forward.
Do you think there's a universal sort of feeling of hardship that you would say, whether you're in Washington State or Washington, D.C. or Madison, Wisconsin, or in the biggest firms in the nation, or in a single person firm, or in regional firms like Boardman? Do you think there's kind of like one universal headwind that people are thinking about?
Um, I do. I mean, I don't know that it's one universal, but I would say the practice of law is itself very different. Clients, again, back in the day, a firm would get a client, and the firm would know that client's business, and it was long term, and that kind of thing. People now, um, they have one firm that'll do this part of their work, and they have a different firm that does that part of the work, or they will go seek representation on individual matters, and it's I don't like to reduce it to bidding, but they will go seek the services of different law firms. That's very different. You've got smaller communities. We're talking a lot about rural deserts, rural legal deserts. If you're a solo practitioner in my husband's hometown, Brillion, Wisconsin, right? The isolation that you might experience because there aren't 5 or 6 law firms. If you're in a big metropolitan area with big law, what does that feel like? And how many lawyers can you support? We've got change in technology, and will the kind of normal business structure hold, or will we see a bunch of law firms downsize? It's different, but I would just say the unifying issue is that the practice of law is changing dramatically all
Yeah.
across the country.
It's interesting that Daryl's family's from Brilliant. That's where half of Laura's family is too. We should go have dinner and connect. We can talk about
Exactly,
the
exactly,
cheese. One lawyer, five cheesemakers, right?
exactly, exactly, exactly.
Well, you alluded to it. And certainly it is top of mind for us. We had a board meeting last week, and one of our board members said we were talking about ways companies are using AI, and he said, "I use artificial intelligence in my legal work because I get it 90% of the way, and then just to make sure I send it to my lawyers." I think the lawyers in the room kind of clutch pearls when it
Yeah,
happened,
yeah.
but right.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, but artificial intelligence is changing every job sector, and
Sure.
the legal profession is not exempt. But when you think about artificial intelligence, what are the challenges and the opportunities that it poses and provides to the legal profession?
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that lots of people are thinking about is things like deep fakes, right? If somebody has a dispute and you go to court, you're used to having evidence. I have evidence, right? Photos can be generated, voices can be copied. Um, it making sure that our system is strong such that the system in which we resolve disputes and things of that nature are in fact dependable. That's a challenge. You know, for all of the good things that AI can do, that's one that is that's going to be a challenge, and you want the outcome to be what it should be based on evidence, but we know that there are some challenges there. Um, some people would call it a challenge. Some people might say it's an advantage. Um, yes, our clients can use AI and they can ask questions. They can come in much more in tuned and much more educated so that you may get to that issue. I think that's a benefit. Um, but for younger lawyers, the way you get to be seasoned is that you got to see every step of along the way. You got to see a transaction or see litigation. And then when the client says to you, as they often do, what's your opinion, or what do most people do, or what have you seen? That's when you would be able to draw on that wealth of knowledge. And so we're going to have to find a different way to get that knowledge in the next generations of lawyers, if clients, I shouldn't say if, as clients are using AI to supplement or help them in their business.
Let me ask you a broader question around bias and
Hmm.
AI. I was reading a book a few years ago. I think it was called When by Daniel Pink, and it was like the surprising timing of perfect decisions was kind of. But one of the things he was talking about is they tracked when you see a judge, either before lunch or after lunch, actually, you could measure your sentence, right?
Yeah.
Like I forget which one, if they were grumpier before or after lunch, but you would get more time if you were on the wrong side of that equation. And
Hmm.
then I think part of the argument was, if you could automate some of that decision making around sentencing structures and but then you see all of this under this idea that like what we put in is us, right? AI is us. It's learning from us.
That's right.
I saw somewhere that the word delve, the AI uses the word delve more than more than the American lexicon allows for, because a lot of the training happened in British areas, including India, a former British colony, and they use delve more. And so it's found its way in, and now you can see delve rising in the Google use.
Yeah.
So fascinating how it's changing us. But I think about if, and I mean bias writ large, right? I don't mean it
Yep.
specifically to, but
Yep.
as we all have bias,
Yep.
and if we program that bias into AI, the outcome will have to be biased. I mean, it's just sort of, and so what risk does that present for for the legal profession of, even if it's training on the smartest lawyers in your thinking, isn't there risk that even that smart legal thinking is baked in and bias gets created for the future?
Yeah. Yeah, I could take it to an even a simpler setting, but it proves your point. You know, in the early days with the cell phone and face recognition, most of what was fed in to have that happen was did not include people of color. And so in my own life, my husband could put his phone up and the face recognition would work immediately, and mine would almost never work, right? Now, in a fairly short period of time, they have improved that technology, but that's an example. We don't we don't know until we know where the bias is, and not to be alarmist, but the more we rely on the algorithms, the less we think about where the algorithms could go wrong. And so, to your point, you get one database that's built and another database, and they're all so you could have layers and layers of bias that are just really based on the input that was used, no ill intent, no desire to exclude any particular group or person or process, but that's what actually the outcome is. And so we have to think about how we can continue to be vigilant about these tools and techniques that we're using. And as Apple's did, I mean, even if you find it, then to be able to correct as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think we think about AI in the legal profession, and a lot of what we've been talking about, at least in the beginning part of this part of the conversation, was around generative AI, right? People generating legal opinion using
Mhm,
AI.
mhm.
Um, but I started with this idea of the judiciary and how decisions are made. Is the ABA seeing any trends where decisions at the judicial level, at
Mhm.
the judge or justice level, are being potentially offloaded to artificial intelligence?
Yes, I one of the things I get to do is actually attend an awful lot of convenings, and some of those the National Center for State Courts. Um, they're talking about that, just like you mentioned, young lawyers or new associates, and whether some of the work that typically would have gone to them. Judges have clerks, and at first, as we saw generative AI, people say, "Well, we're not using that. We're banning that," or what bans almost never, through history, technology bans have almost never been successful.
We agree.
But yeah, and maybe and nor should they be. But our first reaction is always to kind of bar the door. But if you have spent any time reading decisions, one of the very key things that almost every decision includes is um, some section of the decision that talks about how it is this court has authority to decide this issue. So, interestingly, diversity in the federal court, if you have one person from one state and another person from another state, that's diversity. Uh, so that gives the court authority to handle that decision. You always need that in the decision to explain that item has been satisfied. Those are of record. You can search those, citing the case, making sure it's the most recent case. That's pretty standard, right? So those kinds of things are certainly things that courts are using as they're drafting their draft opinions. Then when you get to the meaty issue that is actually in dispute, people are spending their time, you know, trying to draft the decision that addresses those points.
What would you say to a young attorney, or even aspiring attorney, about how to think about AI automation as they enter into the profession?
Um, it's easy to be afraid, it's easy to be concerned. But some of the seminars that I've gone to, they have said, just like back in if you were a good writer or if you were a good researcher, that was, the value that you brought to a firm, or that was the value you brought. Learning how to draft good queries. You may not be actually drafting the you know documents that you might have been drafting, but drafting really good queries will be as valuable, because like anything, garbage in, garbage out. So if I put in a query that says find me some of the hallucination cases that we've heard in the news, where some lawyer put something in their brief, it there are bias in AI. It wants to please you. So if you say, "Find me a case that says this," it might produce something. It might not say that, but it's going to produce something. So finding ways to figure out how to draft the good queries that'll get you really good information and really good results, that would be something that young lawyers should certainly be interested in.
Well, and speaking of young lawyers, they're more than we any time since pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
So despite all of the headwinds and all of some of the challenges, more people or increasing the amount of people want to be lawyers again.
Yeah.
What do you think caused that? I mean, what is after some trends downward, now we're headed upwards. What do you think that was? What caused that change?
I think people do, well, almost everybody you talk to who is a lawyer, somewhere in their past, they say they wanted to help. Um, it is just a desire to help and be engaged. But I think as we've seen some of these challenges, people are saying, this isn't just pushing paper around on a desk. I really have an opportunity to get in and help, to help people who don't have access. Sometimes people look at AI as maybe one of the ways that we could increase access for people, get them some help if they can't afford a lawyer. Um, and so I think people are looking at the challenges that are going politically, economically, and they want to make a difference. And so I know I was at a conference for law schools just a few weeks ago, and all of the deans are saying that law school application is significantly up. So I think it's just people understand that the law has a way of helping and answering questions, and we're seeing lots of change, and so they want to be there and help solve those issues.
So when you think back to when you graduated from law school, and now when this and these new lawyers and technology aside, because
Yeah, yeah.
we've talked about it, what else has changed since when you graduated from law school besides AI?
Um, I think one thing I guess I experienced, it used in order to be a lawyer, in order to have a practice, it was capital intensive, I'll say. You needed books, you needed subscriptions to books, you needed big equipment, the first computers, etc. Um, and now most of the resources that you would use are electronic. You can get a subscription at a much more reasonable price. So it really is, I'll say, a much more landscape leveling kind of environment. That's what let me go out on my own and practice as a solo practitioner for 26 years. Um, I think the way in which people practice, the settings in which they practice, certainly post pandemic, if you'd have said to a lawyer in a law firm, I'm going to work from home, I mean, I think you would have been laughed. Yes, that's not what lawyers do. There are just lots of changes that allow us to practice and serve clients in just very different ways. And I think that means there are many more people for whom the practice of law can be a career. And the more people, the more variety, the more diversity that we have in who's in there, I think we have greater just understanding the world a little bit better and the decisions that people need to make. You just have a better outcome for everybody.
I think you just answered this question, but I'll ask it. But it's on par. You think the lawyer today is better off than the lawyer in the past?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, there are certainly pockets and issues, and as I mentioned earlier, um, we have we have isolation, getting lawyers to go to smaller communities where they might be the only lawyer in town or the only few lawyers in the county. Those are challenges. Um, some of we've seen a whole generation that has had to deal with isolation through things like the pandemic and things of that nature. So we have mental health challenges. The practice of law itself, by definition, you're taking on your clients' stresses and strains. And so making sure that lawyers remain healthy themselves so that they can serve those are certainly challenges. And I'd be pressed to say that's better. That's actually worse. But on par, even being able to talk about some of those challenges, there were years and years where you wouldn't dare mention that you were stressed or that you had some mental health challenges or that you were even seeking counseling. We are much more open in those kinds of issues today, which means people have the opportunity to get help.
Okay, so you're asked to give a global commencement speech. So all of the law schools convene all of their future lawyers into one big room. What's your message? What's your hope for this class of young lawyers graduating next year?
You have been given an incredible education in the law. It will allow you to do everything from answer a question in the grocery store to groundbreaking litigation in high tech. Um, Use it for good, use it as much as you can. In addition to serving clients, be that helper that you wanted to be in the first instance. Make sure that you are being, I call it the citizen lawyer. Um, I sometimes joke you don't have a real board of directors unless you've got at least one accountant and one lawyer also serving. Be engaged in your community, make that difference, help people, not just in the direct client service, but be a part of the fabric of your community. It's
So,
reward. It's important and it's rewarding.
yep. So let's talk about the community side. We talked a lot about the lawyers and the
Yep.
profession. So for people who didn't go to law school, right?
Yep.
So how do they best educate themselves around the legal issues? There's a lot of noise, and it's hard to find signal in that. Um, what's your recommendation for non-lawyers to be able to educate themselves on legal issues?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say ask questions, right? Don't just assume whomever you're hearing things from that's everything. Look for good sources of information. Um, I'd be remiss if I didn't do the ABA commercial. Go to www.ambar.org. We have all sorts of things. We have fact check. We have substantive law places where you can ask, is this legal? We have lots of resources. Look for lots of sources of information. As you know, things are very polarized. There is almost never going to be one answer. And so I would just encourage people to look for multiple sources. And then I would also encourage, it's part of what I'm doing this year. We have to get better at talking to each other. Um, I'm not encouraging people to disagree per se, but even if we disagree, to disagree better, listen carefully. Almost always you will hear something from somebody else and you'll think, oh, I didn't look at it from that perspective. So I would just encourage people, get good sources of data, ask good questions, talk to people you know, talk to people you don't know, and just, engage in what our community and our world are dealing with.
Okay, last question. You've led the state bar. You now lead the American bar. So there's the International Bar Association that we can help you get elected to so that you can represent Madison on a global
Oh,
stage.
well, there is, in fact, an International Bar Association. And in fact, a very dear friend of mine and past president of the ABA, Deborah Enix Ross, she is actually headed in that direction. But no, I think when I'm done with this one, I'm going to spend a little time putting together puzzles and walking the Capitol and enjoying our farmers market. Um, I'll still stay engaged, but no, I don't think I'm headed to the International Bar Association.
Well, if you do, let us know.
Thank you.
Michelle, I want to thank you for a great conversation. It's insightful. Thanks for bringing some of the ABA's knowledge to our audience. Thanks for helping continue to put Madison in prominent places. I certainly appreciate it. I don't know that I could have said to you that I admire you anymore, but I do now after this. And so somehow you continue to wow and to dazzle. And so I want to thank you for spending time with us today. I know you had a busy, busy calendar. I want to thank all of you for joining and spending your lunch hour with us. Certainly want to thank our sponsors for supporting it. And we will see you all next time right here on Lunch Update.
Thank you so much.